So in this short video, I want to highlight a somewhat of a pet peeve or a minor critique that I often find myself perturbed by in some capacity when watching movies in the more historical genre of storytelling. In short, this involves the lack of abilities of actors to immerse themselves into their assigned costumes for their roles. In that sense, it is therefore not good enough for simply the costumes to not look like cheap props or to be factually placed, avoiding overtly obvious anachronisms, but one should strive for, in addition, that the actor at hand embodies the costume with believable accuracy in their portrayal taken as a whole. Now, granted, 2015's The Witch, directed by Robert Eggers, is not a strict historical nonfiction movie. However, it does situate itself in 17th century New England, giving rise to some hopes of verisimilitude in terms of its accurate historical portrayal for the time period, as would be expected from a period piece. In addition, I actually overall find the costumes constructed for the film fitting, and they do not appear to look too out of place, in my opinion, in terms of historical accuracy. It is therefore all the more somewhat perturbing that the characters seem to embody the costumes with an unnatural reverence, treating the garments at hand almost as it would be some kind of prized museum piece. This ultimately has a rippling effect, in my opinion, meaning that the execution of their delivery as characters in the film loses importance, as we, the viewers, are left with a somewhat lack of believability to the historical context which the filmmakers want to convey. It is therefore because of this that I want to make some short remarks on the relation between costumes and actors, as well as giving a supreme example of a movie in the end, which takes full advantage of this relation, in my opinion. First of all, I think that it's important to take into consideration the working aspect of a costume, that is, considering what the character finds himself doing for many of these scenes, and create a costume that complements the occupation at hand. It then follows that the actor in question needs to find a way to coexist comfortably within essentially the habitat of the costume in a convincing way, such that emphasis is placed upon conveying a sense of realism when interacting with the surroundings of the film. This can be placed in a larger context of the general artistic presentation of the film, in which the costume plays a major role. Second of all, I will here quote the great Russian filmmaker of Tarkovsky when he says that, quote, "a newly created costume for an actor is always a disaster," end quote. This is meant to mean that the costume as the garment for the actor would change over time, and therefore inhabit a life of its own, so to speak, in relation to the wearer. This needs to be conveyed by the actor in question, as the costume should reflect that of the composition of the character being played. The personalities, feelings, and even the sense and conduct of movement are all traits that a given character in a film has. The challenge for the actor here then becomes to find the best path possible in order to convey the image of the character through his or her choice in costume design. Some of the problems I find myself having with the characters in The Witch is that they do not seem very at home with their assigned costume, or they fail to properly inhabit the features within their costumes, if that makes any sense. Now, I mentioned previously that I would give an example of a successful immersion of the actors in relation to their costumes and environment shown on film. Actually, this is quite an understatement, as this film conveys a deep truthfulness and execution in all aspects of the characters being portrayed in the film, be it personality, historical grounding, or their expressiveness as characters throughout. This is probably in no small part thanks to the fact that the director of the film, according to IMDb, made the cast live in a forest for 2 years in order to better become acquainted with the experiences of 13th century life, which included, among other things, a particularly harsh winter. The film in reference is what many have considered to be the best Czech film ever made, namely that of the 1967 film called Markéta Lazarova, directed by František Vlasil. The film takes place in 13th century Europe, showcasing the, at that time, unresolved conflict between paganism and that of Christianity, where among other themes such as religious belief, loyalty, superstition, and violence are explored as a daughter of a feudal lord is kidnapped. I will not go into exploring the rich tapestry contained in the film in this video, but I highly suggest watching the film as it conveys the late Middle Ages in such a highly evocative manner for which a repeated viewing is almost mandatory after a first viewing at this point, in my humble opinion. I also want to re-emphasize that I do not dislike the Robert Eggers film in any strong capacity, where I instead use the film as a vehicle in sense to the exploration for the relationship with that of the actors and their respective costumes. In fact, the criticisms that I have levied is not the strongest criticisms for which I have of the movie as a whole. There is in fact a stronger criticism to be had of the film in regards to how it really isn't all that scary, at least for me personally, which I think has more to do with the execution of the scenes rather than the source material itself. There are, however, plenty of beautiful composed shots, and I wish more directors took advantage of the rich treasures of storytelling found within folk tales more than is the current convention. So that's all I have for now. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope to see you in the future for more explorations of movies as well as other subject matters.